This is an exercise in concentration and observation. Simply breathe in and out, allowing your breath to be wave-like. Breathing in and out. And simply sense the sensation of your breath as it moves in and out, allowing it to flow in a circular way so that it's unbroken. Just sense the breath moving through you. And if your thoughts wander and you observe them going in different directions, simply come back to just observing your breath. The way it feels as it moves through the body, the sound of the breath, the sensation of the breath. Just for the next few moments, allow your attention to be absorbed in the movement of the breath in and out of the body. Not trying to force an experience or create an experience, no expectations, just breathing in a wave-like way, letting the breath flow in and out, and simply feeling it, hearing it, becoming completely absorbed in it. And now gently return your mind to your daily world, knowing that small concentration exercises like this not only relax the mind and body, but they also strengthen the power of the mind, so that the soul can hold that space of peace and higher consciousness for a longer period of time.
Hi, welcome to the Meditation Cafe. So good afternoon to you, good evening to you, wherever you are. So once again, we bring you another talk, which is a monthly, this is actually a monthly upliftment program initiated by the Brahma Kumaris Malaysia. Okay. So for this evening, we are going to share with you about nutrition and food for mental health. And we have a very interesting speaker with us. But before I continue further, let me just share something about housekeeping. If you have any questions while you are listening, please put it into the chat box. And we also have translation in Chinese and also Tamil for those who need interpretation. Okay, so this evening, our speaker is going to share about food and nutrition for mental health. And she is a Sister Klig AKERLY from Canada, but at this moment, she is actually going to speak to you from Australia in a Blue Mountain, where she is helping out with being a chef there. And Sister Klig has a very interesting background. She was an educator. She has a degree in education, which she actually taught for the past 10 years. And after that, she decided to change and take up another degree in culinary skills or cooking, where she works in many restaurants in West Coast of Canada. And of course, now she is like free, and she's doing a lot of research and in this cooking. Why she has a particular interest in this cooking? Because Sister Klig has, yeah, I think sometimes it's like when you go through some kind of challenges, like she shared that she had challenges in learning, yeah, disability in learning in that way. And that's where, instead of making it her setback, she decided to research more and understand the effect of food on her own body. And that's why today she is very experienced, yeah, to speak to you about the effects of food on your body. Yeah. And Sister Klig will be sharing on what are the kind of mental illnesses that are actually caused by food. And she will also share with you the type of nutrition that we can have in order to help us to improve our mental health. And also she will share another aspect, interesting, which is food and meditation in that way. And of course, if we have time, she will go on further to share with you about, you know, how to prepare a very unique kind of meal, you know, like breakfast, but not the kind of ordinary that we get it on our table, you know, but something that she kind of created for herself while she was going through this journey. So I will not take up further time. So let me introduce you to Sister Klig. Welcome, Sister Klig, to this program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I became really interested in mental health and food when I was teaching special needs children. And as I was doing my research, and also we call it as like field research. So while I was in the classroom itself, I saw different presentations of different kinds of mental health issues, and they mostly would show up as behavioral problems in the classroom. And as I was researching, I realized that I actually myself had an undiagnosed learning disability. And that disability was very well hidden by myself. And I learned a lot of coping skills. And this is what I have found out in children. Like children also, when they have difficulties learning for whatever reason it is, and I was in a very wide range of different kinds of mental disabilities. And I realized how skillful we are at really going into survival mode. So as a child, for example, one of the foods that I was choosing to eat were actually helping me to stabilize my learning disability so that it would, you know, get me through my day, like more or less. I was actually one of those children who it manifested in a disruptive way for the teachers. But it was managed. In hindsight, I can see now how I managed it. One of my coping mechanisms was using food. However, when I became a teenager and then into my young adulthood, that coping mechanism actually turned against me. And so I developed an eating disorder. So it was like one thing led to another. And so I went from having a learning disability to then having a mental health issue. And then that mental health issue escalated into another problem, if you want to say. So it escalated actually into, it manifested into an anxiety disorder, and in which I would have panic attacks, and it was not very pleasant. And so along the way, I managed to see how food is related to, and was related to, my mental health. And when I started to change my eating patterns, then my mental health definitely improved. And so today, because I also combine it with meditation, so there's an expression that says, as the food, so the mind. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but just to let you know that there is just such a wide spectrum of mental health issues. So it can be manifested, as I said earlier, as it could be something like a learning disability, which can be easily managed. Say, for example, if you have dyslexia, then there are certain tools that you can enable the child with, and so the child will be able to manage to overcome that learning disability. So it's a very mild form. There's the attention deficit disorder spectrum, in which obsessive compulsive disorder is along that spectrum. There's anxiety disorders, which include panic attacks. There is depression. There's suicidal thoughts. It's a huge, huge array of different kinds of mental health issues. Predominantly nowadays, the most prevalent that I've seen is fear and anxiety, issues around that. And it really is, it covers all of the different countries in the world. Really, there's hardly any country in the world that doesn't have some sort of problem in this area. And it's of course more prevalent in the urban areas, but it's also very prevalent in rural areas and small towns as well. And so, for example, in Malaysia, there was a study that was done through Yale University, and it has cited that 1 in 3 adults in Malaysia are now currently suffering from one form of mental health issues, or are challenged by one form or another of mental health issues. And within that also problem area or challenging area, also they have found that very young children, 7 to 9, are now starting to be affected by mental health issues. And part of what I've learned with children, which definitely affects adults as well, is the patterns of eating that children have just now are predominantly eating refined foods. And within that refined food is also, there are many different types of additives. And the young child's brain is very easily affected by even trace amounts. Like, for example, in the 60s, there was research that found that very young children, babies, toddlers, up to toddlers, I guess, if they ate pieces of, and just even very small amounts of the paint, if paint was chipping off of the walls. Now, if that paint had lead inside of it, and that baby ingested the paint, the lead, it caused brain damage. And so there are and it doesn't take very much, as I said, of that. Now imagine that these young children are eating probably out of, I would imagine something like 3 or 4 times that they're eating during a day, they're ingesting foods that are highly toxic to their body. And this definitely affects their minds. And so anyway, that's one of the main reason why I'm really very interested. And then just recently, I was in our retreat center in Yarra Valley outside of Melbourne, and I had the opportunity to cook for the Parkinson's health retreat. And that really opened up my eyes into another whole area of mental, neurological disorders, which also mental health issues are affected by.
So, Sister Klig, are you saying that, this mental health that you mentioned about this compulsive disorder, yeah, what about other mental health like autism, Down syndrome? Are they also affected, or will they improve with food?
Well, Down syndrome wouldn't, because it's actually a genetic disorder. It's not, I mean, it manifests as a mental disability, but but physically you can definitely help, but because of the certain kinds of foods that the child can eat, will help to keep the weight down, for example, because Down syndrome children are prone to overeating. And so that also is not a very good issue. But that in Down syndrome in particular, you wouldn't be able to help that particular with food. But almost all of the other disorders, mental disorders, even if they're very extreme, you can help. It can be ameliorated, at least it can be improved. They're less manifestation of the disorder.
And earlier you mentioned something about, children are affected and also adult. Now I'm just curious, does, like whatever the adult eat while they are carrying, these babies in their womb, is it, will they affect the children in that way? Whatever the mothers are eating, the mother-to-be are eating in that way?
Absolutely, yes. Because everything that the mother ingests passes through the bloodstream of the child. And one of the really sad situations that I was in, I was working in a children's hospital in Canada, and we had situations where the mother during pregnancy was using heroin, and the baby, when it came out, was addicted to heroin. And then it was one of the most difficult working situations that I've ever been in, because the babies were totally helpless, because they couldn't even give them, like they can give adults now, they can give them other drugs to compensate, but that baby just had to go through all of the withdrawals just without any help at all. It was so sad.
As you were saying that as is the food we eat, so is our mind. And I've actually heard this saying that says that, your stomach or the gut is like your brain also. Can you just elaborate?
Yes, that's a very interesting new concept now. That's there's quite a lot of information about it on the internet. And actually, they call your stomach or the gut as the second brain. So there are certain foods that I eat that are helping to help the brain be more alive. We know that the brain needs oxygen. If the brain doesn't have oxygen, then we will end up having like a stroke, for example. But also, the foods that we eat are also directly going into the brain. And so, for example, the neurotransmitter, which is the one that the neurotransmitter just simply means the relay system of sending messages through the neurons in the body. So serotonin is one of those and it helps to regulate the sleep and also the appetite. And 95% of the serotonin that we need in the body is produced in the stomach. So there's a direct correlation between the gut and other different kinds of things, like, for example, sugar. If you have too much sugar over a long period of time, then people can develop diabetes, which means that their insulin level is not right. And the insulin level is directly related to the hormones, and the hormones are produced by the brain. The brain tells the body what to make and what not to make, and like this, sends all the messages down the spinal cord. And if we could have the picture up about the brain food, we can see that. I'll just wait till it comes up. So you can see that they've made this picture to look like a brain. And then you can see at the bottom of the tomatoes, you can see that there's this, I think it's maybe celery, and that's the brain stem. So the brain stem goes down and it will send all the signals to communicate with the rest of the body. And one of those, of course, is the stomach. And so the stomach picks up the messages and then gets the messages from the brain and then sends up whatever information or whatever foods or nutrients that the brain needs at that time. Thank you. If you can.
Yeah, okay. Talking about food, what do you think are the how does food affects our moods, our stability of mind, our clarity of mind?
Right. So if I think about the kind of foods that, for example, make me feel happy, right? So if it might be, say, for example, a biscuit. So if I'm seeing the biscuit and I'm like, oh, this is going to make me happy, and then I eat the biscuit and it tastes really yummy because it's got just the right amount of sugar in it, or just the right amount of flour, or whatever it is that I'm looking for, right? But then if I wait, maybe 10, 15 minutes, what happens to that feeling of happiness? For me, if I eat a biscuit and it tastes really good, I'm like, oh, wow, this is so yummy. It tastes really good. But then 10 or 15 minutes later, my stomach is saying, this is not the right food for you. So my stomach would just rebel, So it's that momentary, we seek out, and it's become a habit that we seek out these different kinds of foods to help us feel better in one way or another, which is why we end up with overeating problems or undereating problems, whichever way it is, or we end up with ulcers, or we end up with problems with our colon. We end up having issues with diabetes, or in my case, one of my other health issues was hypoglycemia, which is the opposite of diabetes. So I produced the insulin, but I couldn't, but I was affected by the sugar. So my sugar levels were all kind of all over the place. So I would become very hyper, and then that would make my heart race, and then my mind would just really be all racing as well, and I wouldn't know what I was doing. I couldn't focus on what I was meant to be focused on, that kind of thing. And the other side of it, of course, was when I didn't have the sugar, then I would feel faint or something like that. So definitely there's a really solid connection between the gut and the brain. And we need to pay attention to, if I want to start feeling better, I need to start paying attention to what's happening in my gut and really give it as much love and attention as I can, so that my brain will also then start cooperating and start also feeling better about myself and the world, actually.
Would you be able to share with us, like, okay, you talk about food, like what is the discipline of food is like for breakfast, lunch and dinner, or in between, what are the type of food that we should take in? Or maybe first you can share with us some super food that, good for all.
Okay. So there is a psychiatrist in New York who, her name is Dr. Uma Naidu, and I refer to her work at the end of on the resource list. And she's come up with 6 basic pillars of nutritional psychiatry, and it's a story that we've heard before, and she's saying it again. As many other people are, but they're just really so simple and easy to follow if I want to make a change and be better with my mental state of mind. So eat whole foods, and it's recommended that if you can possibly eat a 100% plant-based diet is the optimum, but failing that, at least do 80-20%. And that means a variety of grains. So it means whole grains, but it means a variety of grains. So it doesn't mean that I eat whole wheat pasta for lunch, or I eat whole wheat pasta for dinner and then I have the whole wheat sandwich for lunch. No, it means I vary the different kinds of foods that I eat, the whole grains that I eat during the day. Eat the rainbow. What does that mean? That means eat all different kinds of colors. So there's the purple color of eggplant. There's the white color of a potato. There's the orange color of a carrot. There's a yellow color from a pineapple. And as we saw in the brain food picture, there was also the different colors were there, the white and green and yellow, and I don't think blue. And then also green foods. Kim, you mentioned about the superfoods. So one of the reasons why they're called superfoods is because they have extra nutrients, which are called phytonutrients in them. And those trace nutrients really stimulate a very good environment for the gut, and we call it as all that bacteria, that the good bacteria that's in the gut. It will help to put like a layer of protection so that the toxins, which one of which might be and a bad bacteria, it will not allow that bacteria to enter the system. So I want to eat foods that are also going to be creating a higher immune system for myself, and also create and I want to eat foods which are anti-inflammatory, and that's part of that. It would be green foods, so like the broccoli, kale, spinach, collard greens, or mustard, those lettuces, different kinds of lettuces also. And then the fourth pillar is to listen to your body's signals. So start paying attention, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. Think about the body's, what is my body telling me now? So try to practice listening to the signals in the body and then responding to them rather than to react. So for example, am I hungry? This is one of the things that I need to pay attention to, is oftentimes I'm actually not hungry, I'm actually thirsty, but I'll go to food and then my body will try to cooperate with me by eating the food and then digesting the food, trying to get the water from the food. But what I really need is the water. So just paying attention to those kind of signals as well will really help me to discern, and will help to sharpen my discernment power. And then the fifth pillar is to be consistent and be balanced. So always have a balance in what I am choosing to eat. And then the last one is, of course, to avoid any of the triggering foods. So, for example, sugar is refined sugar is pretty well a main trigger for many people. And that sugar is likely going to be in other foods that we like to eat. So it could be in a cake, it could be in chocolate or anything like that. And then another superfood that is coming into its own is 90% to 100% chocolate, or even the powder, which is cacao powder or cocoa powder. As long as it doesn't have any other additives in it and the processing was really good, this is a fantastic food, especially for the brain, because it stimulates the dopamine in the brain, which is the part of the brain which creates it's like called the happiness hormone, I think it is, yeah. And that will, just eating it in the correct amounts. Another food that's really great for the brain is the avocado. Another food is any kind of nuts or legumes. Those are particularly good for brain activity, for stimulating really positive brain activity and helping those neurotransmitters to really work and cooperate with one another. And sorry, did I answer?
Okay, Sister Klig, can we just go back to the food? And I think you mentioned many terms but I'm sure that, in order to benefit all the Zoomers out there, can you just explain what is actually whole food?
Right. Okay. So anything that is unrefined, basically. So food that I'm going to choose that's going to be in the raw state. So, for example, instead of choosing frozen spinach, I'll choose fresh spinach, right? So that's an example of a whole food. Frozen spinach is okay if you can't get anything else, but fresh spinach would be a better choice because it's in its whole state. And as fresh as I could possibly get it as well. So can I go to a market where they get the food in every day, for example? Things like the grains, different kinds of grains. So there's oats, there's spelt flour, which is a bit refined, but it's still in its whole state. So it means it's just been finely, very finely crushed. Brown rice is very good. Even other rices, the basmati or the white rice, if you balance it out with other foods, then it also can be considered as a whole food. Lentils, for example, is a whole food. Beans, there are certain kind of beans that are more favorable to the to good mental health, but basically any kind of lentils is lentils or beans are also very good. And let's see, then all of the different kinds of vegetables. So basically there's the 4 different kinds of food groups. So there's fruits, vegetables, and your proteins, which are going to be plant-based. And if you can't, then at least get as much, the 20%, let it be the so-called white meat. So chicken or fish. But if I can go towards the 100% plant-based, then I'm going to get the best for the brain. Also, I forgot to mention about dairy. Dairy is really something that dairy, wheat, and sugar, unrefined sugar, is probably the worst 3 enemies for any kind of mood that I want to maintain or have. Yeah, they're really, really toxic for the body. And I know they're in everything, so it's like almost impossible, you can say, to not be exposed to it. But if I can try, then that is helpful.
I think in Asia, we don't take as much wheat as in the foreign, so we get less of that problem that the Westerners or Europeans are getting. But what is particularly so bad about wheat in that sense?
Well, the main problem with the wheat is that it's how it's been produced. Now there are huge, like kilometers and kilometers of fields that are only produce wheat, and that wheat is not wholesome anymore because it's filled with toxins, and the body just simply cannot digest it. It can't deal with it, actually. And the other part of that is the gluten in the wheat also does something. I'm not totally familiar because I'm not a medical person, but it does something to, like, really literally jam up the digestive system, and it stops it from working. That's definitely how it was in my case. I've been not having any wheat now for probably 15 years. Not that I've not ever have it, but of course I've had, small little pieces of cake or cookie biscuits or whatever, but generally I avoid it. And it's just something in the wheat itself, the way that it has been produced, that it's very highly toxic to our bodies.
Toxic in a sense because there's too much pesticide, or is it because it is one of the GMO's food, genetically modified?
Right. I think it's both. Yeah, it's definitely both. Yeah. Then GMO, that's another thing that's also very prevalent in our foods, and it's very incognito, you can say. People don't know that it exists, but it does. And it really, they said in the beginning when they were promoting the GMOs, and they were saying this is going to be really good for us, and it's going to help us to produce more food and like this. But really, since we've been growing food, the only thing that really grows good food is good soil. And if you pollute the soil, which the GMOs do, then you're not going to get good food. So I don't know. Anyway, we kind of went off the sideways on that one, and now they're finding out, of course, there's all these ill effects to the GMOs, so it's like that.
Coming back, earlier you mentioned about that we need, different colors of food. What is the significance of having different colors? Does the different colors represent different nutrients or minerals or whatever it is?
Yes, it does. And it also keeps the eye engaged, so, and if the senses are engaged with the food that we eat, then we're much more conscious of the food that we eat. So for example, if I have an array of colors rather than just one color, then it will stimulate my senses. So if I have purple and green and yellow and red, all of these different, and orange, all these different kinds of foods, colors, all have associated with them different nutrients that the body needs. So if I can train my eye to be attracted to many colors of food, and I want to put them on my plate, maybe not all at once, but at some point during the day, then I know that I'm going to be getting those particular nutrients in the body. So for example, carrots, they're orange. So anything orange usually has the carotene in it. And carotene also is associated with vitamin A. And vitamin A is in particular good for the eyes, but it's also very good for the brain as well.
Okay. At this point, I would like to just, mention that if any of you have any question, you can put it in the chat box. I will pick it up later and maybe direct it to Sister Klig. But Sister Klig, coming back, I have also another question. Just now you mentioned about additives food and trigger food. Now, additives food, are these food that cause addiction, or is it chemically added food?
I think it's the situation where when I eat those foods, it causes a disorder in my brain. It reconfigures somehow the pathways, and the messages get all kind of distorted, very similar to the experience that people have when they are on drugs. And food and drugs are very related in the way that they affect the brain activity. And so if I'm going through a period of anxiety, I may want to shut myself off from feeling those feelings by eating a lot of high carbohydrate foods. So a lot of white food, for example, like it might be pasta or white bread or potato chips or French fries. You know, I might be eating a lot of those kind of foods, wanting to actually stuff the feelings. And it does do that for a temporary period. But after that, then there are those feelings maybe morph to another set of feelings. So maybe guilt now comes up, and the guilt will come up because now I've eaten all this food that I know I shouldn't have eaten because now it makes me gain weight. And now the whole self-esteem, you know, goes down, and then, you know, one thing leads to another, and then I would become triggered by a situation in my environment, and then that would cause me to be fearful or to have anxiety, and then I may go to the food again. So it's this vicious cycle that comes up.
We talk about nuts, we talk about seeds, we talk about wheats and all this. Someone asked a question, what about honey? Is it good for us?
Honey in moderation is probably okay. I would definitely choose it over any refined sugar. But I would also be very cautious about why and when I am eating the honey, and also in particular to eat honey that has not been like tainted, so that it is the pure honey. Because if I eat what's called raw honey, that means that it has a lot more nutrients in it than processed honey, which also might have some corn syrup also added into it.
Okay, thank
And
you.
good question.
Yeah. And
I mean, it's much better. They say, for example, if I had the choice between the white sugar and the honey would definitely be more of a stabilizer for my anxiety, for example, than it would be than white sugar would be. Or even raw sugar is not really, because it says it's raw sugar, but it really is refined as well. So it's also, it comes under the refined foods. Or is there another question?
Yeah, while we are still on it, is stevia good for as a replacement for sugar?
Right. So the kind of, as they say in English, the jury's out in this stevia issue, because on the one hand, it is a good replacement, but on the other hand, because it's refined, unless you can get, as we were lucky in Yarra, because we grew a stevia plant ourselves. So unless you can have the actual stevia plant, what actually happens is the reason why it's used as a replacement for sugar is because it's considered as natural, because it comes from a plant rather than being refined and through the chemical process, like those other little things when they came out. I can't remember what they were called now. Little tablets people put in their emplacement of sugar.
Aspartame.
Yes, like that. So what happens is that when I ingest the what so-called artificial sugar, then the body doesn't recognize it it recognizes it like as sugar, but not as sugar. So it's like it's trying to locate the source of what this thing is to break it down, and it really can't. So it's really doing more harm than good at the end of the day. But it is, on the other hand, it's good because it's keeping me away from adding sugar to my tea and coffee and like that. So, or my cereals. So in that way, it's a little bit better. But if I could just move away from anything artificial and move to replace that sweetness with natural foods, for example, train the taste buds to like the taste of raisins, for example, or dates, or other dried foods, because those foods have nutrients associated with it. So I'm eating for the taste of the sugar, the sweetness, but I'm getting the benefit of the nutrients, whereas stevia doesn't have any nutrients at all, unless you're eating the leaf itself.
So it's kind of funny, you know, like when you put stevia into your mouth and then all your workers in your body, your stomach, they get confused, not knowing what to do with it.
Right. And again, you see, it's the thing about the taste, isn't it? You know, like I'm letting my taste control rather than to let my mind and my stomach regulate it.
Earlier, you also mentioned, you know, like when we have the color, different color of food, you know, it's like we are more attentive towards it. Yeah. So is there another way, you know, sometimes people say that meditation affects food. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so is there another, is it kind of justifiable that, you know, the way we eat or attention on the food is very important?
Yes. So in the last 25 plus years, I've been really paying attention to my food in particular, because I really have noticed that there is a definite difference between eating my food, paying attention to the food itself and the way I'm eating it, and the whys and the wherefores of eating it. And so there's a movement now that's quite popular, and it's called mindfulness. And when I direct my attention to the food that I'm eating, and I ask myself if that food is going to bring me benefit, not just is it going to be tasting good, but is this food going to be of benefit to me? And then I go to moving to how it is that I eat the food. So for myself, with my learning disability, I was just basically open the mouth and just food goes down and that's it. You know, it's like 1, 2, chew, and that was it. Did not have any thought about the food going down. I mean, still now it's still not that easy for me sometimes, but mostly I pay attention to the way that I'm eating the food. And the first thing is that I look at the food and I have gratitude for what that food is going to be bringing me, because that food is going to be bringing me nutrition in one way or another. And maybe gratitude to the person who made the food. And if that person was me, then gratitude to myself for making the food. Perhaps gratitude for the source of the food. So again, did someone buy the ingredients for the food? Did I go out to the market? Whatever. Who grew the food? So in any of those kind of thoughts in my mind when I'm looking at the food, will slow down the process of eating, and it will create an awareness of what I'm eating, and that will greatly help my digestion. And if any way that I can aid my digestion, it means that I'm aiding the way that it will eventually get to all of the cells, put nutrients into all of the cells of the body that need those particular nutrients. So even if I'm eating like a handful of nuts, say for example, almonds or walnuts. Walnuts are also, if you can see the shape of the walnut, you can see that it looks kind of like a brain because it's got all these little kind of waves in it, sort of like how a pattern of a brain is. And so walnuts are very highly nutritious for the brain. They have omega 3s and 6s in them, as you know, flaxseed is. So if I have any kind of little snack and I'm eating it, let me just be aware of the way I am eating, and then it will really just change that attitude towards my food. Then automatically I'm going to, and very naturally, I'm going to want to change the pattern of eating, and then I'm going to change what it is that I'm eating as well, because I'm aware of what I'm putting into my body, rather than just picking up a piece of food and just eating it because it's food and it's there, you know. And if someone's offering me food, also ask myself the question, you know, like, is this food going to be bringing me benefit? And if it's not going to be bringing me benefit, then I can just politely say, no, thank you, you know, and I really appreciate you offering it to me, but, you know, it's not for me right now. And so like that, I think that I know for sure it's really helped me in situations when I'm feeling like uncomfortable. And I think, I really would just like to just go away and just stuff myself with a lot of, I don't know, like bread or something. That was my sort of go-to. I would just like love to eat sandwiches. And so it helps me to really pay attention to what do I need right now in this moment. Do I really need to eat this food? And it's like, yes, you need to eat this food because it's the time for you to re-energize, then great, then let me do it. But if I'm doing it because there's some sort of emotional thing going on in my head, then better to just really pay attention to that emotion and just to see, okay, what maybe I just really need to just sit and be quiet for a bit and have a glass of water or make myself a cup of tea, although not too much tea if you're looking for the brain, good brain activity. But yeah, so just sitting with myself quietly, and that may just be what I need rather than to, fill myself with some food.
This is very interesting that you were sharing about gratification, to the food that you are taking in. It's just like, we tend to take it for granted that, okay, I just put it in my mouth and then it goes by itself into it, and not paying attention that the whole mechanism that's going on, how the workers in the stomach are actually taking in that food. But when I have the thought of gratification, means I'm also saying, giving love and thankfulness to the body for being able to process this food. At the same time, I think the body also enjoys it. That's why they always say, the way to happiness, the way to make yourself happy is actually through the stomach, because it is actually the gut of happiness also in that way. Yeah.
Yes, very true. Right. And they also, in English, we say, it said the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. So you give him something good to eat, then he'll give love in return. But yeah, definitely, there's all these different kinds. But it's, what's really interesting when I look at my process, I look at how when I make a choice and I start to really use my intellect, I really can see the strength inside. We call it as the soul, the spirit, the human spirit really is has an enormous amount of power within it. And we think so little of ourselves just in general. And to see the beauty of ourselves, and we can do that through just really being in control of the senses. And then if I start to be thinking better about myself, then I'm naturally going to gravitate towards wanting to, eat properly. Like for example, I got rid of my, or not rid of, but I overcame my eating disorder when I was pregnant, because I wanted to only give myself foods that were of like that, those 6 pillars, where I was just eating nothing but whole foods. I didn't eat anything that was going to be damaging in any way. I didn't put anything in my mouth that I knew was going to go directly to the child. And I was the best weight ever in my life, even though I was carrying a child. I was literally all child. There wasn't any other excess fat on my body. And, I was very happy about that, because the first time in my life that I didn't feel, even though I had, a big stomach, but I knew that was because I was pregnant, not because I was fat. So I really totally enjoyed that, that way of eating. And of course, I had trained myself then and then not only, but after that also, because I was nursing him. And I had all that practice for a year and a half, 2 years actually, where I was only eating what I needed to eat. And then when I finished nursing him, then it was automatic for me to eat foods that were good for me. And then when I went through, different kinds of periods in my life, actually, I never reverted back to that eating disorder. And I think that was really well done on my part. I mean, still, it can manifest every now and then. If I'm just having a low period, then it can come back again. But I'm able now to know and to recognize what it is. And I know that I'm doing something not good for my body, and then eventually, I'll just go through it. So the next day it won't be good. I'll get a headache or whatever it is. And yeah, then it's finished. But at least I have an awareness of it.
Sister Klig, just to summarize it in a way of like, okay, for the food, what kind of food should I just on the fingertips that I should take in for a day? Like you were mentioning, okay, it should be anti-inflammatory food. And what other types?
Right. So if I can take anything green, so the meal has some kind of green. So it's either a salad, or it's spinach or broccoli or kale, something that's green. If I eat some sort of seed, so for example, quinoa, or which is also considered as a grain, but I eat something like the nuts, so walnuts, almonds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds, or flax oil if you can get it. Some places it's a bit expensive, but you can get the flax and then just use a coffee grinder, grind down the flax. As I said, any kind of nuts, almonds, walnuts, cashews to some extent. The B vitamins, nutritional yeast. It's quite predominant now in a lot of the shops and supermarkets. The fresh fruits, and then of course any kind of the root vegetables are good, like sweet potatoes are fantastic. Avoid all oils of anything deep fried. So I want to avoid the deep fried foods, anything refined, anything with sugar in it.
And I think also probiotic is very important.
Yes. So for example, if and also prebiotics. So unrefined foods, so whole foods, for example, they've unfermented and then, or fermented, sorry, and then they will provide this bacteria condition called prebiotics. So I'm providing my gut with some bacteria that's going to be helping the digestive process, and also the probiotics. So and they also help to stimulate the enzyme production in the stomach. And then the probiotics mostly I can get through foods like coconut yogurt, for example, or soy yogurt or almond yogurt. So any of those kind of alternative dairy foods that have the live culture in them. It has to stay live. If it just says bacterial culture, they're going to be dead and they're not going to provide the gut to produce more of them. Anything like sauerkraut, kefir, kombucha, those are all really healthy things to eat and to drink. And kombucha is a very, it's really easily accessible and easy to make as well. So those are some of the foods that you can eat. And sweet potato is particularly good because it has a lot of fiber in it. So you also want to create a good digestive process for your stomach. You want to have a lot of fiber. So our fruits have a lot of fiber in them, and the vegetables also. So, and the potatoes, sweet potatoes, carrots, they have a lot of fiber in them. So I want to look towards things that have fiber as well, and avoid all of the unrefined foods.
I didn't see any question in the chat box, but I have one last question before we move on. Would you be able to share, I know when you were with us, visiting us, I noticed that your breakfast was quite different, you know. Could you just share with us, like, okay, on a breakfast or lunch, what do you just have, you know? Of course, you know, for us, normally we will either go for, bread or some kind of noodles, but you were eating something very different.
Right. So I was making what is commonly known as a smoothie. And in my smoothie, I put in 3 fruits and 3 vegetables and ginger. So ginger is very good for stimulating the blood. And it's also a root vegetable. So it's also very good in that way. So the 3 fruits are apple, banana, and raisins. And the 3 vegetables are white potato, carrots, and beetroot. And I blend them up with a little warm water, and that's my breakfast. And it has all the nutrition that I need basically for at least until 6 hours. I can go 6 hours if I have that in the morning. I don't need to eat. I'm not even hungry for any tea or anything. And because the nutrients are broken down a bit with the blender, so that really helps also the digestion to be more efficient. so that it can extract the nutrients, because the nutrients are broken down already, as opposed to the cooking process. So that's my breakfast. And then my lunch will usually be, we usually eat, I'm in the retreat center, so we'll usually eat our main meal at lunch. And so I'll have some sort of steamed vegetable. I'll have a rice or quinoa. And I usually will have some, because I have an allergy to soy, so a lot of people will have soy, but that you have to watch out for the GMOs in the soy. And then I'll have probably some hemp seeds on that, and I'll have a salad, definitely. I'll have a big salad. So it could be a raw salad, like with different kinds of vegetables, like zucchini or zucchini and carrot. And then you can put some nuts on the top, which is sometimes what I do. And then for my snack in the afternoon, then I will maybe have either some raisins and nuts, or sometimes I make myself a little trail mix, or sometimes I'll have a piece of dark chocolate and raisins. That's actually one of my go-to desserts. And it's amazing. I only have a square about, I want to see if I can put my hand, see if you can see. Yeah, about this big. Yeah, so not very big. And I have like 2 squares, and I just break it up into small pieces, and I put a few little small handful of raisins and eat that, and totally satisfied. And plus I'm having some really good food for the brain as well. So yeah, and then supper is usually I hardly take very much for supper, maybe just a rice cake and some tahini or something like that.
I'm sure there's a lot more questions we can ask you. And I see that there are questions coming in, but unfortunately, we have come to the end of the time that was allocated. But if any one of you have any more requests, you can always put it into the chat box, and we maybe take it out into another session. Yeah.
Or I'm happy to respond and to email back, or talk on WhatsApp. That's fine too.
Or maybe we can have another session where you can show us how to do some simple food, where you, and then, where you have got the maximum nutrients in that sense, like you're mentioning having just chocolate and raisins, dark chocolate and raisin, which is actually a superfood for us and is good enough for us. So for now, we will like to ask Sister Klig to maybe take us on a meditation, on a reflection. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So all of you can sit with your, back straight, and just listen to what Sister Klig is going to share, and as if like you are creating this thought yourself. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So taking a few moments, I sit comfortably and close my eyes and become very still. I notice my breathing, taking a breath in and feel it pass through my nose. I take another breath, a little deeper this time, aware of the oxygen going all the way down to my toes. And another breath in. I feel relaxed, calm, and steady. Now I'm imagining that I'm sitting down to a simple meal, a nutritious meal. I look at the food, conscious of the nutrients it provides. A feeling of gratitude. Because the food will sustain my mind and my body. The meal is filled with vitamins and minerals. I become fully aware and focused on what I am eating. I see it completely. All the colors of the bowl, the plate, and the food itself. I'm aware of the different textures of the food as I put it into my mouth. Eating slowly, conscious of the taste of each of the foods. As I taste more acutely, I add joy to what I eat. As I swallow the food, I feel a wave of gratitude from my body, thanking me for the physical and mental substance it has received.
Thank you, Sister Klig, for sharing this topic of food and nutrition on mental health with us this evening. And for those, if you have any questions that was not being answered, you can put it actually into the YouTube. It will be uploaded in the YouTube. And if you can also go to the YouTube to subscribe so that you will get the updated information. And also you can also put your question there. And also we have, if you stay connect, if you like to connect with us, we have actually meditation, learn meditation online, or you can connect to us through WhatsApp if you have any question or any topics that you would like us to share or arrange. Yeah. So anyway, watch out, as I mentioned, that we will invite Sister Klig back again on demonstration on how she prepares meals. Yeah. Okay. And just one final thing is that Sister Klig has been with us, showing us her face for the last 1 hour. So if you don't mind, if you could just turn on your video so that she can have a look on who are her audience. Okay, before we close this program.
Yeah, thank you. No, everyone's so shy.
So thank you to all of you for being with us this afternoon, and I hope that you have an enjoyable time and also pick up, if not many, but a few tips. Have an enjoyable evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much.